and welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast. My next guest, the founder and chairman of Strategic Dynamics Inc. The firm helps organizations accelerate revenue generation by improving sales effectiveness. He is the co-author of The Seller's Challenge, How Top Sellers Master 10 Deal-Killing Obstacles in B2B Sales, and also the author of Buyer-Centered Selling, How Modern Sellers Engage and Collaborate with Buyers. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Thomas J. Williams.
Well, thank you, Janice. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with all of your listeners. Thanks for inviting me today. You know, I think Tom. The only time I go by Thomas is when my mother would get mad at me. Then I knew that change in the voice inflection and the change in the way she addressed me, I knew I was in some type of trouble.
So I'll call you Tom from now on, so you know you're safe.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you for that.
So let's talk about The Seller's Challenge, the book you wrote with Tom Same, which focuses on specific challenges salespeople face that aligns the sales process with the buyer's complex decision-making process. What are the real barriers and obstacles? And so tell me more about how you kind of came across this area, why you felt it was really important to talk about it.
Well, Janice, you know, the evolution of the book really was a culmination of discussions that Tom Sane and I had numerous times. Tom actually lives about 20 minutes away from me here in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area. And so we would get together routinely and kind of compare notes of what we were doing. We were both selling a sales methodology that really did a variety of things. It talked about call planning and execution. There was another methodology about how to win a complex sale. There was another one around, negotiation, another one around, large account management. And when we would deliver those programs, ironically, somebody would come up to us, at a break, over dinner, things like that, and say, I get the methodology you're teaching us. I really like it, but can you help me with this specific problem? And they would come up with, a variety of things like, how do you handle your prices too high? I just got an RFP from an unexpected RFP from a client, my best client. I've got a great client that's looking to buy one of our new generation products, and they want me to go before a buying committee. And so there were things that weren't taught in the typical methodology program. And when Tom and I went back and looked at most of the books that were written, we really couldn't find anybody who had addressed all of those different types of challenges. So we listed about 21 of those challenges, and we covered about 10 or 11 of them in the first book, The Seller's Challenge. And then in the second book, Buyer-Centered Selling, we picked up the rest of those and made Buyer-Centered Selling really more around looking at not only what's the challenge from the seller's point of view, but what's the buyer's dilemma when they have to try to work with a seller to make a decision. So that was really the evolution of how the two books evolved.
Excellent. Really interesting that, we say to salespeople to actually really listen to what the buyers say. And that's exactly what you did as well. You really listened to, what your clients were saying, and, great source for material for a book. Practicing what you're preaching, Tom.
Well, good. That's what we always say at the end of the day. Always talk to and listen to the customer, and you can't go wrong. And in this case, that's exactly what we did. And in fact, we had a lot of our customers, reviewing the early chapters as we wrote them to get their feedback and make sure that we were on target with what we were doing.
Yeah. Well, then let's talk about your second book, which I have here. So yeah, I haven't quite finished it yet, so I'll be writing a review when I have. So you've told us, what's the source of the material. But let's talk more about the buyer's perspective. How do you kind of switch it across to really take the buyer's perspective?
Well, one of the things that, I think we did is we looked at, a couple things. One is really what's going on, within the buyer, what I'll call today's modern buyer. And really there's a variety of things you can look at we put this in the book. One is that it's everybody understands buyers have more knowledge today than they've ever had before. Right? There's a plethora of information on the web and other areas that they can go to. And so that's one factor, is that they have a lot of information. And so they can, as a result of that, they can be a little bit further down their buying process before they ever engage with the seller. The second thing is that they're they're spending a lot more time in what we call the research phase. They don't want to make a poor decision or a bad decision. So they're spending more time in research. There's a tremendously increasing number of buyers that are involved, because again, it's about risk and about making a change. And so what used to be one decision maker now is oftentimes, trying to get consensus around a specific change from one product or solution to another. There's also, I think, a greater reliance on self-diagnosis, because there's so much information that's available on the web, because there's so many other people they can get access to in a hurry to talk to, that are, that are even from competitors, other customers of yours. There's a reliance on self-diagnosis. And so more and more customers come to you, to sellers today, and say, I know what I want. Here's what I want. What's your price? And then I think we're also faced with an expanding, subscription economy. Things like Netflix have changed the way people buy. We don't need to physically own something. We can simply subscribe to it. And I think Uber and Lyft are kind of an offshoot of that. We don't really subscribe to it. It's kind of an as we need it purchase. So it's very similar to subscription. And I think we're seeing more and more buying committees. I can't speak to this in the UK, but I can tell you in the United States, whether you call them decision-making units or you call them agreement networks, there's a larger group of people who are coming together in some formality to make a decision. And they come from a wide variety of disciplines. They can be cross divisions. They can be, domestic and international folks in a large multinational company. And so it becomes much more difficult for a seller to engage with all those types of people. And I think lastly, there's a genuine, or I guess last 2 points I would make is there's a generational shift, right? We're seeing more and more younger people in middle and senior management roles that have a different philosophy and a different way in which they want to learn or approach making a change. And then, last but not least, I think buyers today are looking for, trusted sources of information. And when you weigh how they feel about salespeople, oftentimes it's very low on the pyramid. They're looking for other sources of trusted information, whether it's material that's it comes from research analysis from their peers. It could be things come from peer review journals. They're looking for other sources of trusted information until that sales professional has earned their trust and respect. So those are some of the trends that we've seen.
So how does the sales professional earn their trust and respect?
I think one of the ways to do it is by preparation. I'm real big on preparing for sales calls. So I think it comes across when you're prepared. You're confident. You ask better questions. Preparation is just absolutely key. No sports team goes and plays a game without preparation. Surgeons that operate on patients in operating rooms, walk through a surgical checklist, to make sure they got the right patient, what the right procedure that they're going to do, et cetera, et cetera. Airline pilots walk around the plane before they take off. They also have a checklist that they go through. I mean, there's numerous numbers of people and professions that have checklists. And so whether you call a sales call plan a checklist or something else, you have to have some type of preparation. Preparation gives you confidence, to do that. And I think the second thing is that you have to, sales reps can differentiate themselves and earn trust by the types of questions that they ask.
It's interesting. I was just thinking, is it Alice Kemper was talking about that, and not asking the obvious questions, and also Deb Colvert as well. Not asking the obvious questions. It's almost like you can download the questions off the internet. Well, the buyers can as well. So why would you ask those questions? Yeah.
Well, I always say to salespeople, a great question is when somebody says to you, wow, that's a great question. I have to stop and think about that for a minute. Or nobody's ever asked me that before. Those are the kind of questions that give you pause to say, wait a minute, this individual is thinking about my problem, opportunity, or threat in a different way, and they might really be able to help me. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to differentiate, ourselves from other people. Tom and I actually wrote a blog a couple of years ago, and the title was, are you memorable or forgettable? And after a sales call, and it's really true, is that if you think about so many of your buyers, they may see 8, 10, or 12 salespeople in a day, depending upon their role. And at the end of that day, are you memorable? That you did something that stood out from everybody else, or are you forgettable? And I know when I look back at my early days of being a manager and a leader in a company, there was always one sales rep that I said to my admin, every time he comes to town and he wants to see me, I'm available, because he always taught me something. And and I think that's what you're looking for as a sales professional, is to be that individual, male or female. You want to be that person.
I wonder, setting aside the sales knowledge and real skill, I wonder how much personality has to do with this, so that you're just likable, fun type of person, aside from the expertise. How much do you think that has to do with that?
It's a great question. I think, I think you want to be respected more than you want to be liked, right? And so I think, there's that edginess that you can have, that I can have, be a great sales professional, and I can kind of challenge you in a very positive, professional way, and you might not want to go out and have a drink with me after work, but I've earned your respect. And so I think that, likability, is one thing if I want to go out and have a drink with somebody, but I think as a sales professional, I'd rather be respected for, that I've got their interest at heart, and I'm going to push them a little bit if I have to, in order to help them see that there's a bigger opportunity that they're missing.
But nowadays, so many buyers and customers are doing research online, and they're searching for solutions, and they're searching for experts as well to advise them about the solutions. So your profile, your online profile, has to come up and has to answer that I'm in the right place, I need to speak to that person. So how much of what your expertise do you think you need to put online?
I think you want to make your expertise online outcome focused. In other words, it's all about the buyer. It's what you do for the buyer. It's not a resume. I think when you think about a LinkedIn profile, to me, it's not a resume. It's what are those things that you do that help buyers, solve either a problem, an opportunity they have, or mitigate a threat that they're faced with. And if you can show them that you've got that type of expertise, it's great. I think the other side of it is that human side, to show people that you are personable, you are approachable. I know that I kind of come back that, when your point about likability, there has to be a bond that that forms between two people. You have to say, he or she is a smart person. They've got a lot to offer, but there's got to be some type of charisma there that says, I really want to continue to have a conversation. So in that sense, I think, having a good facial photo that shows that you're smiling, and that shows in your profile that you're a normal person. You've got interests and things like that. You're not just that stoic, staid, college professor that that you kind of thought about when you were in school.
B2B sellers have shifted. Have they shifted enough to be buyer-centric, to be customer-centric?
I think some of the folks have done that in a very good way. I think the modern seller today, I think, has to do a variety of things if they're going to interface well with the modern buyer and how the buyer has changed. I think one of the things is that we talk about and think about a lot about is insights that educate. Are you providing insights that get people to think differently about their situation? Because for people to change, they have to look at what's their situation today, what might it look like in the future if they implement, did something different, and what's that cost of an action or that gap that's in between the two, because if it isn't big enough to drive a truck through, it's not a priority, right? And so if there's no priority, there's no need and there's no sale. So that's part of it. Can you create insights that educate? They don't just occur at the beginning to get of the buying process to get somebody out of status quo. Those insights continue through the buying process as you're talking to different stakeholders, at different portions of their pathway to make a decision. I think a good sales rep provides what we call prescriptive guidance. They give the buyer, they show and help the buyer to buy. Oftentimes buyers are buying for the very first time. When you think about buying, there's really three things that happen. One is I'm replacing or substituting one product for another. In another case, I'm buying a product because of the enhancements or improvements. It's better, more features, more benefits, etc., more value, so it causes me to change. And the third reason is disruption. And so am I providing that prescriptive guidance to help people, make a decision that they actually want to go on a process with me? It's really, I think, for the organization to map the sales process with how people buy. And oftentimes people have not, don't know how they're going to buy. They don't know the process in their own organization for a variety of reasons. I think good modern sales professionals are spending more time in discovery. They're really thoroughly understanding, all the needs and wants, desires of the organization, and what's going on within it before they offer, potential solutions. They say, I have to earn the right to talk to you about my product or service because I've done great discovery. And then I think, it's around, the right messaging to the right person at the right time. It's around helping that buyer build consensus, around a common problem that they can all engage around, because they've all got their own individual wants and desires from a personal or emotional point of view. But can you wrap them around and get them to agree on a common goal that makes sense for the organization? That's how you can affect change. And then I think, mitigating risk is huge. Change is difficult for people. I'm no different than, anybody else. Every time I go to Olive Garden with my wife for dinner, or for our lunch, I order eggplant parmesan. And she says, why don't you order something else? I said, I like eggplant parmesan. She said, look at the menu. There's a bunch of other things on the menu. And so change is difficult for me.
Yeah.
So I recognize if it's difficult for me, it's certainly difficult, for the folks that I deal with, as buyers.
I'm laughing at your eggplant. I'm going to send you something different.
All right.
Your eggplant parmesan.
Yeah, you and my wife would get along just fine.
Yeah, I'm sure I will.
Yeah, exactly.
So what tried and tested strategy would you offer listeners on how to scale their sales?
Well, one of the things that's really worked, very well for us is what we call in a book a collaboration plan. Others, may call it a mutual action plan or something like that. But basically it's a document that we've developed, that really asks the prospective stakeholder or buying influence, whatever you want to call them, to kind of go on a process with us and say, look, if we're going to potentially work together, here are the things that we need to talk about, and agree on. And so I get agreement up front that, hey, this is going to take a certain amount of time, your time and other people's time. I'm going to need, some type of commitment, from you at certain stages. We're going to need to collaborate. We're going to need to think about, building consensus. I walk them through a variety of these things. We document what the problem, the opportunity, the threat is. We talk about the current state, the future state, and what the cost of an action is, and then we kind of develop a plan of how we're going to work together to solve that particular problem, opportunity, or threat that they have. And I tell them up front, that the reason we're going to do this, use this plan. And if I don't have the right solution for you, I'm going to tell you that. But at the end of the day, even if I don't have the right solution, you're going to have a plan that you can use with someone else to get the right solution. And so it's helping them think through, that process. Now, a couple key things about this that's interesting. One is just by sitting down and saying, I want to develop a collaboration plan with you, immediately I differentiate myself from every other seller that just wants to come in and pitch their product or do a little bit of discovery and come back and say, well, here's what we found, and here's our ideal solution, and coincidentally our product is the right solution for you, and here's the price. The second thing it does, if you think about it, is when you develop and you work with a stakeholder like this, you mitigate some of the problems that we talk about in the 2 books. One is, I don't have to worry about getting by the gatekeeper because I've just already established with you, I need to talk with other people in the organization. You want to go with me on those calls? You're more than welcome to do it, but I have to have access to other people. 2, change is going to be difficult. Are you ready for change? And what are some change initiatives that you've incorporated in the past that worked extraordinarily well? I talk about the commitment. I talk about how we're going to need to build consensus around a group of people, that we're going to have some folks that are, got disparate ideas at the beginning, but we're going to work through those and kind of come up with what's best for the company, and then look for the right solution. And so I mitigate a lot of things, like we have to go to an RFP, who's the gatekeeper, getting by the gatekeeper, handling certain objections. I eliminate, can I get access to the executive owner or the executive C-suite? All those things are mitigated up front because you've developed a collaborative plan.
Let me ask you, if you're on a desert island on your own, what's the one thing you'd take with you?
Oh, that's a great question. If I was on a desert island, the one thing I would want is a very large, very sharp, very strong knife, because if I had that, I could probably, kill some game so I could eat. I probably could make some shelter with it, and I'd have something that I could protect myself with. So I think that's the one thing I'd love to have.
Well, that tells me you're a very practical person. You've got one tool that has many jobs.
Exactly. Yeah. We call it leverage, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Tom. This is, I would urge the listeners to read your books, because, they're so enlightening, and they're books that information you're not going to find anywhere else. It's not the standard, sales book. So, I'm going to put the links in the show notes. But Tom, how can listeners get hold of you?
Well, I think the best way is twofold. One is connect with me on LinkedIn. I always enjoy connecting with folks on LinkedIn. I often jump on a phone call, video or audio, a call with folks. So LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. Second thing is my email is TWilliams. It's very long, TWilliams at strategicdynamicsfirm.com. Put an S on dynamics. So TWilliams at strategicdynamicsfirm.com. And those are the best ways. Or just pick up the phone. My cell number is on my LinkedIn profile. And then feel free to call me as well. Excellent. I love talking to sales professionals.
Right. Well, I've loved talking to you. So thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Tom.
Thank you very much, Janice, for inviting me. I enjoyed it, and wish you well.